The transport ship cut through the black space between stars. Inside the small cabin, Commander Jake Morrison stared out the window at the passing void. He had made this journey dozens of times before, but something felt different today. The emergency summons from the Galactic Council had arrived without explanation. No details, no warning, just an order to appear before the full assembly within 48 hours. Beside him, Ambassador Lisa Crawford worked on her tablet. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, pulling up files and reports. She had been humanity's chief diplomat for 7 years. Before that, she had been something else entirely. But those days were supposed to be over. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Ahead of them, the council station hung in space like a massive crystal jewel. It stretched 3 kilometers across, its white walls gleaming in the light from nearby stars. This was the heart of galactic civilization. 47 different species came here to trade, negotiate, and maintain peace across hundreds of systems. Jake checked his uniform one last time, navy blue with Earth's insignia on the shoulder. 300 years ago, humans had worn uniforms like this for war. Now they wore them for meetings and ceremonies. The galaxy had changed humanity, or so everyone believed. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. When they finally walked through the airlock into the station, Jake noticed the guards. Twice as many as usual. They stood at every corridor junction, their weapons visible and ready. Something had the council scared. Lisa noticed too. She said nothing, but her eyes tracked every guard, every exit, every possible threat. Old habits died hard. They reached the main chamber and passed through the security scanners. The machines beeped and flashed, checking for weapons and unauthorized technology. Jake and Lisa carried nothing but their identification credentials. They had learned long ago that the council preferred its members unarmed. The chamber doors opened. The sight took Jake's breath away even after seeing it many times. The room was enormous. Its ceiling curved high overhead, transparent walls showing the stars beyond. 47 different zones filled the space, each one separated by shimmering force fields. Each zone had its own atmosphere, its own gravity, its own environment customized for the species that occupied it. Jake and Lisa walked to the human zone. It was a small area compared to some of the others. Humanity was still relatively new to the council. Only 3 centuries of membership. Some species here had been part of the organization for 10,000 years. As they took their positions, Jake looked around the chamber. The Veltroni delegation huddled together in their water-filled tank. They were gentle beings, peaceful herbivores who spent their lives writing philosophy and poetry. The creche clustered in their hive structure zone, hundreds of insect-like beings moving as one consciousness. The Zenthari floated in their energy field, beings of pure thought and light who served as the council's judges and mediators. And then there were the Krell, 7 feet tall, covered in scales that gleamed like polished metal. Their delegation stood in perfect military formation. Ambassador Vex, their leader, watched the humans with cold reptilian eyes. The Krell were the council's military force. Their fleets patrolled the trade routes. Their soldiers kept the peace. Or so the official story went. Jake had never trusted the Krell. They reminded him too much of the warlords and tyrants from Earth's history, beings who took what they wanted and called it justice. But the council needed them. Most species here had evolved on peaceful worlds. They had no concept of violence, no understanding of warfare. The Krell provided the strength that kept the predators away. Except now, apparently, the humans were the predators. A chime sounded through the chamber. All conversation stopped. The Zenthari overseer materialized at the central podium. Its form flickered and shifted, barely solid, held together by forces Jake did not understand. When it spoke, the words bypassed sound entirely and appeared directly in his mind through the translation implant behind his ear. The session is called to order. We gather today to address a matter of universal security. The human delegation will approach the central platform. Jake and Lisa exchanged a glance. Then they walked forward. The force field surrounding their zone flickered and opened, allowing them to step into the neutral space at the chamber's center. Jake could feel every eye in the room watching them. 47 different species, thousands of individual beings, all focused on 2 humans standing alone under the crystal ceiling. The overseer's voice filled his mind again. Humans of Earth. For 3 centuries, your species has been a member of this council. You have traded fairly. You have negotiated honestly. You have caused no conflicts and broken no laws. Your conduct has been exemplary in every measurable way. Lisa stepped forward slightly. Then why have we been summoned, Overseer? Because we have discovered the truth about your species. A truth you have concealed from us since the day you requested membership. Jake felt his stomach tighten. What truth? The Overseer gestured and a holographic display appeared above the podium. It showed Earth. Not the modern Earth of cities and farms and carefully managed wilderness. This was Earth from millions of years ago. Forests and plains and oceans teeming with life. And in those forests, small figures moved. Primitive humans. Hunting. The image zoomed closer. The humans carried stone weapons. They tracked an animal through the grass. They moved with purpose and coordination. They worked together to drive their prey toward a cliff edge. The animal fell. The humans descended to claim their kill. The Overseer spoke again. We have studied your evolutionary history. We have analyzed your biology. We have examined your cultural records, and we have reached a unanimous conclusion. You are predators. The chamber erupted. Voices filled Jake's head through the translator. Panic, fear, anger. The Veltroni delegation physically recoiled in their tank, their gentle bodies curling away from the humans. The Kresh swarm split apart and reformed, their collective consciousness processing this new threat. Even species Jake had traded with for years now looked at him with terror in their eyes. Lisa held up her hand. Please, let us explain. The Overseer's presence intensified. Explain what, Ambassador? Your forward-facing eyes that track prey with binocular vision? Your teeth designed to tear flesh? Your persistence hunting techniques that drove animals to exhaustion across your plains? Your entire mythology built around the glory of the hunt? Jake spoke carefully. We are omnivores, Overseer. We eat plants as well as meat. And yes, our ancestors hunted. But that was millions of years ago. We have evolved beyond those instincts. We choose to be peaceful. Choose. The word echoed through the chamber. That is precisely what concerns us. You choose to be peaceful, which means you could choose otherwise. You have hidden your true nature behind trade agreements and diplomatic smiles, but you cannot hide your biology. Every species in this chamber evolved on peaceful worlds. We have no predators, no killers, no hunters. And then you arrived. Predators pretending to be prey. The accusations continued. Speaker after speaker rose to denounce humanity. 3 centuries of peaceful cooperation meant nothing. Their eyes, their teeth, their evolutionary history marked them as threats. Jake listened to species he had helped, nations he had traded with, delegations he had shared meals with, all calling for humanity's expulsion from the Council. And through it all, the Krell remained silent. Ambassador Vex watched with those cold reptilian eyes, waiting, judging, planning. Jake knew that look. He had seen it on the faces of men who enjoyed having power over others. The Krell were going to make their move. The only question was when. The answer came soon enough. The chamber finally fell silent. The accusations had run their course. Now came the part Jake had been dreading. The Krell would speak, and whatever they said would determine humanity's fate. Ambassador Vex rose from his seat. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural killer. His scales caught the light and reflected it in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. This was a being bred for combat. Every movement spoke of violence barely contained. He stepped to the edge of his zone and the force field flickered to allow his voice to carry across the chamber. The humans are predators. This much is clear. But let us not panic. Let us examine what kind of predators they are. Jake watched Vex carefully. The Krell ambassador was not trying to defend humanity. That much was obvious. This was something else. Something calculated, Vex continued. I have studied the humans extensively. Yes, they evolved as hunters. Yes, their biology reflects this heritage. But observe their behavior over the past 3 centuries. Have they conquered any systems? Have they demanded tribute? Have they used their military power to intimidate or control? The chamber waited. Several delegates shook their heads or made negative gestures. Exactly. The humans have forgotten what they are. They have become domesticated, tamed by centuries of civilization and comfort. They trade in metals and information. They write poetry and music. They negotiate when threatened and retreat when challenged. These are not the actions of predators. These are the actions of prey animals pretending to be dangerous. Jake felt Lisa tense beside him. The insult was deliberate. Vex was not just dismissing humanity's peaceful nature. He was mocking it, calling them weak, domesticated, prey. Vex turned to face the human delegation directly. His tongue flicked out, tasting the air between them. "Tell me, Commander Morrison, when was the last time your species went to war?" Jake kept his voice level. 347 years ago. We unified our world and chose peace. Vex repeated the words like they were a joke. 3.5 centuries without warfare, without conquest, without testing yourselves against real opposition. You have grown comfortable, safe, weak. Lisa spoke up. "We prefer to call it civilized." Vex laughed. It was a cold sound like rocks scraping together. The Krell have been civilized for 10,000 years. Yet we maintain our strength. We train our young in combat. We test ourselves constantly. We remember what we are. You humans have forgotten. You wear uniforms with no understanding of warfare. You carry weapons you have never used. You are predators who have declawed themselves for the comfort of lesser beings. The chamber buzzed with reactions. Some species seemed relieved by Vex's assessment. If the humans were truly weak, truly domesticated, then perhaps they posed no threat after all. Others looked uncertain. Jake could see the calculation in their eyes. Was Vex right? Had humanity really forgotten how to fight? The Overseer spoke. "Ambassador Vex makes an interesting observation. Yet the concern remains. What if the humans remember? What if some crisis awakens their dormant instincts? Then they would be a threat." Vex agreed, "Which is why I propose immediate action. The Krell supremacy moves that humanity be expelled from the Council. Their trading privileges should be revoked. Their ships should be banned from Council space, and their home system should be placed under quarantine, not as punishment but as protection, for them and for us." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Quarantine. That meant cutting Earth off from the galaxy. No trade, no travel, no access to the technology and resources that kept human civilization thriving. Billions of people would suffer. Colonies on distant worlds would be abandoned. 3 centuries of progress would collapse overnight. Lisa stepped forward. Her diplomatic mask was still in place, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "Overseer, humanity has been a loyal member of this council for 300 years. We have never broken a treaty, never threatened another species, never given any cause for concern beyond our evolutionary history. To punish us for biology we cannot change would be unjust." Vex cut in. "Justice is not the issue, safety is. The Council exists to protect peaceful species from the dangers of the galaxy. The humans are predators, dormant perhaps, but still predators. Allowing them to remain puts every gentle species here at risk. And unlike the Krell, who serve the Council with honor, the humans offer nothing except the possibility of future violence. We offer our knowledge," Lisa said firmly. "Our technology, our perspective. We have solved problems that no other species could address because we think differently. Our predator heritage gives us advantages in strategy, planning, and innovation. We have used those advantages to benefit the entire Council, all of which could be turned against us." Vex replied. "The very traits that make you useful make you dangerous. Better to contain the threat before it manifests." The debate continued for hours. Species after species rose to speak. Some defended humanity, pointing to their record of peaceful cooperation. Others supported the Krell position, arguing that biology was destiny and predators could never be truly trusted. The Veltroni pleaded for understanding and compassion. The Kresh calculated probabilities and risks. The Zinthari mediated and questioned and tried to find common ground. Through it all, Jake stood at the center platform and watched his civilization's future being decided by beings who had never known violence, who had never fought for survival, who saw humanity through the lens of their own peaceful evolution and found them terrifying simply for being different. And he watched Vex. The Krell ambassador moved through the chamber like a politician, speaking quietly with different delegations, reinforcing his arguments, building support for his position. But there was something else in his movements, something triumphant. Vex was not just advocating for human expulsion. He was enjoying it. The session finally adjourned for the day. No vote had been taken yet. The Council would deliberate overnight and reconvene in the morning. Jake and Lisa returned to their quarters in the station's diplomatic wing. The rooms were comfortable but felt like a cage. Lisa threw her tablet across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. 300 years. 300 years of proving ourselves and it means nothing. They look at our eyes and our teeth and decide we are monsters. Jake poured 2 glasses of water from the dispenser. They had been careful not to request anything that might remind the other species of human dietary habits. No meat, no animal products, just water and synthetic proteins that could be broken down from atmospheric molecules. We knew this might happen eventually. The integration specialist warned us. Some species would never accept us, but not like this. Lisa took the water but did not drink it. Not because of what we are, but because of what we used to be millions of years ago. It is not fair, Jake sat down. Fair has nothing to do with it. Vex is right about one thing. We did forget. We spent so long being civilized that we convinced ourselves our old nature did not matter. That evolution was just history. But to species that never had to hunt, that never had to kill to survive, we will always be predators first and people second. So what do? We prepare for the vote. We hope enough species remember 3 centuries of cooperation, and we accept whatever decision the council makes, because the alternative is proving them right. If we fight the expulsion, if we threaten or intimidate or show even a hint of aggression, we become exactly what they fear. Lisa finally drank her water. And if they vote against us, if they quarantine Earth, then we go home, and we figure out how to survive alone again. They sat in silence after that. Outside their window, the council station turned slowly in space. 47 civilizations working together in harmony. Soon it might be 46. And somewhere in that massive structure, Ambassador Vex was celebrating humanity's fall. Jake did not sleep that night. He kept thinking about Vex's words. Domesticated, declawed, weak. The Krell ambassador had been so certain, so dismissive. 3.5 centuries without war meant humanity had forgotten how to fight. They were predators who had forgotten how to hunt, but forgetting and choosing were not the same thing. Humanity had not forgotten. They had decided. They had looked at their capacity for violence and chosen something better. And if Vex could not understand that difference, then he did not understand humans at all. Morning came. Jake and Lisa dressed in their formal uniforms and prepared to face the council again. As they walked through the station corridors toward the main chamber, Jake noticed something odd. There were even more guards than yesterday, and they were not watching the humans. They were watching the Krell delegation. Something had changed. Something had happened overnight. And as they entered the chamber and saw the empty Terran delegation zone, its force field disabled and its water tanks drained, Jake understood exactly what that something was. The Terran zone stood empty. Jake stared at the drained tanks, at the broken equipment, at the signs of violence that marked the transparent walls. The Terrans were aquatic beings, peaceful and philosophical. They had been council members for 6,000 years. Their delegation consisted of 12 individuals who spent their time writing poetry and mediating disputes between other species. They had never hurt anyone. Now they were gone, and the chamber knew who was responsible. The Krell delegation stood in perfect military formation, as they always did. But today their scales displayed different colors. Bioluminescent patterns glowed across their bodies. War markings. Every species in the council had learned to recognize those patterns. They meant blood had been spilled. They meant victory had been claimed. Ambassador Vex stood at the front of his delegation. His eyes scanned the chamber with cold satisfaction. He showed no shame, no regret, no attempt to hide what had been done. The Krell never hid their nature. They were proud of it. The Zenthari overseer materialized at the central podium. Its crystalline form flickered with patterns that might have been anger or distress. It was hard to tell with energy beings, but its voice in Jake's head carried emotions he had never heard from it before. Fury, grief, horror. The Terran delegation has been murdered. All 12 members were killed during the night cycle. Security footage shows Krell warriors entering their zone after disabling the force fields. The execution was systematic and complete. Ambassador Vex, you will explain this atrocity. Vex stepped forward without hesitation. The Tertians voted against Krell expansion in the Outer Rim. They blocked our military appropriations request. They undermined our authority and weakened the Council's defenses. This was a military response to an act of political aggression. The Krell supremacy does not tolerate interference with our mandate to protect Council space. The chamber erupted. Voices filled Jake's translator implant. Shock, outrage, fear. But beneath it all, Jake heard something else. Helplessness. The Council security forces consisted of ceremonial guards from peaceful species. They carried weapons they barely knew how to use. They had never faced real violence, never trained for combat, never prepared for a species that would murder diplomats over a political disagreement. The Overseer tried to restore order. "This is murder. You have violated the fundamental law of the Council. No violence within Council space. No harm to delegates. These rules have stood for 10,000 years. Vex laughed. "Rules only matter when someone can enforce them. Your security forces are worthless. Your peaceful species cannot stop us. The Krell have provided military protection for this council for millennia. We have saved you from pirates, raiders, and invaders, and this is how you repay us. By siding with weak voices that undermine our strength. Well, no more. From this day forward, the council will remember what real predators look like, and you will understand that cooperation with the Krell is not optional." Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not a random act of violence. This was a statement, a demonstration of power. Vex was showing the council that the Krell could do whatever they wanted. That 300 years of peaceful governance meant nothing when facing beings willing to kill for their goals. And there was nothing the council could do about it. Lisa touched Jake's arm. "We need to do something. If we stand by and let this happen, if we do nothing while innocent beings are murdered, then what are we?" Jake looked at her. Her eyes were hard. Her jaw was set. The diplomat was gone. What stood beside him now was the person she had been before. A soldier. A fighter. Someone who understood that some situations could not be resolved with words. But if we act, we prove them right. We become the predators they fear. We validate every argument for expelling humanity from the council. Lisa shook her head. "Look around, Jake. The council is falling apart. The Krell just murdered 12 delegates and nobody can stop them. If we do nothing, this organization dies. If we act, at least we save whoever is left." Before Jake could respond, more Krell warriors entered the chamber. They were fully armed. Plasma rifles, combat armor, weapons designed to kill. They spread out through the neutral zones, taking positions that gave them clear lines of fire to every delegation. Vex addressed the council again. The Tertians were the first lesson. There will be others if necessary. Any species that opposes Krell authority will face consequences. Any delegation that votes against our interests will learn what happens to those who forget their place. This council exists because we protect it. Never forget that. The Veltroni delegation huddled in their tank, trying to make themselves invisible. The Kresh swarm buzzed with panic, their collective consciousness struggling to process violence on this scale. Even the Zenthari Overseer seemed diminished, its crystalline form flickering uncertainly. And then Vex made his final mistake. He turned toward the human delegation. His tongue flicked out, tasting the air. His eyes gleamed with contempt. He walked slowly across the chamber floor, his warriors falling in behind him. And he spoke the words that would change everything. As for the humans, the domesticated predators, we do not fear you. 300 years of peace have made you weak. You have forgotten what violence looks like. Forgotten what it means to hunt. Forgotten everything that made you dangerous. You are prey pretending to be predators. And if you interfere with Krell justice, we will show you what real hunters can do. Jake felt something shift inside him. 347 years of chosen peace. 3 centuries of restraint. Decades of diplomatic training telling him to stay calm, to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. All of it balanced against one simple fact. Vex had just murdered 12 innocent beings, and he was threatening to do it again. Jake looked at the Krell warriors spreading through the chamber. 15 of them, all armed, all trained, all confident that their reputation and their weapons made them unstoppable. They moved like soldiers, like professionals, like beings who had never faced an enemy that fought back with equal skill. He looked at the other delegations, terrified, helpless, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand up to the Krell. But there was no one. The council had relied on the Krell for military strength for so long that they had no defenses of their own. No warriors, no soldiers. No one trained to fight except the humans. Jake reached under his uniform jacket. The council scanners had checked for energy weapons, for explosive devices, for technological threats. But they had never thought to check for something as primitive as a chemical projectile weapon. Humans had stopped using them for warfare centuries ago. They were museum pieces, relics, harmless antiques. His fingers closed around the grip of his sidearm. He had carried it for years out of habit. Old military tradition. None of the other species even knew what it was. They saw it as decorative, a ceremonial item, like the medals on his chest or the insignia on his shoulders. They were wrong. Vex stopped 3 meters from the human zone. His warriors flanked him. Their weapons were not yet raised, but the threat was clear. The Krell ambassador smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. So tell me, Commander Morrison, will the soft humans interfere? Will you try to stop us? Or will you do what you have done for 3 centuries and talk while stronger beings act? Jake drew his weapon. The movement was smooth, practiced, muscle memory from training that had never truly stopped. His instructors back on Earth had been very specific. Humans might choose peace, but they needed to remember how to fight, just in case the galaxy was not as friendly as it appeared. 3 rounds, center mass. Vex's eyes widened in surprise. His hand reached for his plasma rifle. But human reflexes were faster. Forward-facing eyes that tracked targets with perfect binocular vision, hands that could throw stones with lethal accuracy from 50 meters away, a brain that processed spatial relationships and predicted movements with deadly precision. Vex fell. The mighty Krell ambassador, the being who had spent days mocking humanity's peaceful nature, the warrior who thought 3 centuries without war meant humans had forgotten how to kill. He hit the floor and did not move again. The chamber went silent. 47 species, thousands of individual beings, all frozen, all staring at the 2 humans standing in their zone with weapons drawn, all realizing the same terrible truth. The predators had not forgotten anything. The Krell warriors stood frozen. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The sound of Vex hitting the floor echoed through the massive chamber. The mighty ambassador who had terrorized the council lay dead at the feet of the beings he had called domesticated prey. Jake did not wait for them to recover. He moved. 347 years since humanity's last war, but war was like riding a bicycle. The body remembered. The muscles knew what to do. The brain calculated angles and trajectories without conscious thought. Millions of years of evolution had built humans to hunt, to track, to kill, and 3 centuries of peace had not erased that programming. The nearest Krell warrior raised his plasma rifle. Jake shot him twice before the weapon reached firing position. The warrior's scales were tough, natural armor that could deflect energy weapons, but chemical projectiles followed different rules. They transferred kinetic energy directly into flesh. The warrior dropped. Lisa was beside him. She had drawn her own weapon. The ceremonial sidearm that the council scanners had dismissed as primitive technology. She moved like water, flowing between positions, her eyes tracking targets with the same predatory focus that Jake used. 2 more Krell fell. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates screamed. Some tried to flee, but the force fields kept them trapped in their zones. The Krell warriors finally reacted, raising their weapons and firing. Plasma bolts filled the air with blue-white light. But they were shooting at where the humans had been, not where they were. The Krell fought like soldiers, disciplined, organized, following tactical formations they had drilled for years. But those tactics assumed their enemies would fight the same way. Stand their ground, trade fire, rely on armor and firepower to win through attrition. Humans did not fight that way. Humans were pursuit predators. They moved constantly. They flanked. They used terrain and cover. They adapted, and most importantly, they never ever stopped moving. Jake rolled behind a support column as plasma fire scorched the air where he had been standing. His eyes scanned the chamber. 15 Krell warriors, now 11. They were spreading out, trying to use their numbers to surround the humans. Good tactics against a stationary enemy, worthless against hunters who refused to be cornered. He counted the spacing between warriors, calculated their reaction times, noted which ones had clear lines of sight. His brain processed it all in less than a second. This was what human brains had evolved to do. Track multiple moving targets, predict behavior, identify weaknesses. A Krell warrior broke from formation trying to flank Lisa's position. Big mistake. Jake shot him 3 times before he made it 2 meters. The warrior's plasma rifle clattered across the floor. Another Krell moved to retrieve it. Jake shot him 2. Lisa had circled around a delegation zone using the force field as cover. The Krell could not shoot through them without killing the delegates inside. But humans were smaller, more agile. Lisa moved through gaps that the 7-foot-tall Krell could not exploit. She came up behind 3 warriors and dropped all of them before they realized she was there. 8 left. The remaining Krell finally understood what they were facing. These were not merchants, not diplomats, not domesticated prey playing at being dangerous. These were hunters, real predators, beings who had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain through intelligence and endurance and an absolute refusal to quit. One warrior tried to run. Jake shot him in the back. In human warfare, there were rules about such things, honor codes. But this was not war. This was a hunt, and prey that ran died tired. 7 left. 3 Krell warriors formed a defensive position near the Overseer's podium. They had good cover, overlapping fields of fire, standard military tactics. It should have worked. But Lisa had already circled to their flank. She threw her combat knife across 15 meters of open space and buried it in the throat of the leftmost warrior. The throw was perfect. Humans had evolved to throw projectiles with lethal accuracy. Rocks, spears, knives. Their shoulders rotated in ways that no other species could match. Their brains calculated trajectory automatically, compensating for distance and wind and target movement without conscious effort. A million years of hunting had made them the best throwers in the galaxy. The other 2 warriors turned to face Lisa. Jake shot them both. They had forgotten about him for 3 seconds. Against humans, 3 seconds was an eternity. 4 left. The final 4, Krell huddled together. They had seen their ambassador killed, watched their comrades fall one by one, learned too late that size and strength meant nothing against enemies who thought faster and moved smarter. Now they were facing something their species had never encountered before. Equals no, not equals. The Krell were strong, tough, trained for combat from birth, but they fought to prove dominance, to establish hierarchy, to intimidate lesser beings into submission. They were pack predators, bullies who had never been challenged by something willing to fight back. Humans were different. Humans hunted to survive. They did not stop when their prey fought back. They did not retreat when wounded. They did not give up when tired. They were persistence hunters, endurance predators, the kind of being that would track an animal for days until it collapsed from exhaustion, that would wound and track and wound again until nothing remained but the inevitable end. One of the remaining Krell dropped his weapon. He raised his hands in surrender. In Krell culture, this meant acknowledgement of defeat. The winner would accept, and the loser would be allowed to live with reduced status. Jake shot him anyway. This was not a dominance fight. This was justice for 12 murdered Tertians. There would be no surrender, no mercy. The Krell wanted predators. They were getting predators. 3 left. The last 3 warriors tried to charge. It was a desperation move. They had finally realized that staying in position just meant dying slowly, so they chose to die attacking. It was brave, honorable by their standards, completely futile. Jake and Lisa shot them all before they covered half the distance. Human eyes tracked multiple moving targets simultaneously. Human hands pulled triggers with precision that came from millions of years of throwing stones at running prey. Human brains predicted movement and adjusted aim faster than conscious thought could follow. The last Krell warrior fell 3 meters from Jake's position. His plasma rifle skittered across the floor and came to rest against Vex's body. The mighty Krell ambassador, the being who had called humans domesticated prey, who had mocked 3 centuries of peaceful civilization, who had thought the absence of violence meant the inability to perform it. He had been wrong. Jake stood in the center of the carnage. 15 Krell warriors, all dead. 90 seconds from start to finish. He was breathing slightly harder than normal but not winded. His heart rate was elevated but steady. His hands did not shake. This was what his body had been designed to do. Hunt, track, kill. Lisa retrieved her knife. She wiped the blade clean on a fallen warrior's uniform. The gesture was casual, practiced, something she had done 1,000 times in another life. Before the diplomatic corps, before the peace, when humans still remembered what they were, the chamber remained silent. Every species watched the 2 humans standing among the bodies. Their forward-facing eyes, their efficient movements, their complete lack of hesitation or remorse. The council had spent 3 days debating whether humans were dangerous predators. The answer was no longer in question. The Xanthari overseer materialized near the center podium. Its crystalline form flickered with patterns that might have been shock or awe or fear. It looked at Jake, then at Lisa, then at the bodies of beings who had thought themselves the galaxy's apex predators. When it spoke, its voice carried emotions the translator struggled to process. Commander Morrison. Ambassador Crawford, you have killed 15 beings without trial or judgment. You have violated council law. You have committed murder in the heart of our civilization. Jake holstered his weapon. His voice was calm, professional, the voice of a soldier reporting to command. The Krell murdered 12 Tertian delegates. Your security forces were unable to respond. We did what was necessary to prevent further loss of life. That is what predators do, Overseer. We protect the herd, the herd. The word echoed through the chamber. Not the council, not the community, not fellow delegates, the herd. Prey animals that needed protection from hunters. And the two humans standing in a circle of dead warriors had just proven they were the shepherds, not the wolves. Lisa stepped forward. Her diplomatic mask was back in place, but everyone knew what lay beneath it now. Overseer, humanity has spent 3 centuries proving we can choose peace. We built trade networks. We negotiated disputes. We smiled and cooperated and pretended that millions of years of evolution did not matter, because it made you comfortable. But Ambassador Vex made a critical error. He confused our choice to be peaceful with an inability to be violent. He forgot that we chose this path, that we were not forced, that we could choose differently if circumstances demanded. She gestured to the bodies. He learned the truth too late. Humans are not domesticated. We are simply patient, and when patience ends, when violence is forced upon us rather than chosen by us, we show the galaxy what millions of years of evolution created. No warning. No hesitation, no mercy. Just the cold efficiency of beings who climb to the top of their food chain through intelligence and endurance, and an absolutely. The silence in the chamber stretched for what felt like hours. In reality, it was less than a minute. But every species there was processing what they had witnessed. The transformation from peaceful diplomats to efficient killers had taken seconds. The return to calm professionalism had been just as quick. The humans stood in the center of the carnage looking completely unchanged, as if killing 15 armed warriors was just another day's work. The Overseer finally spoke again. The question remains, what do we do with you now? You have proven yourselves capable of extreme violence. You have shown that 3 centuries of peace were a choice, not a limitation. Every fear the Council expressed about your predator nature has been validated. How can we trust you after this? Jake looked up at the energy being. You cannot trust us any less than you trusted the Krell. They murdered delegates over a political disagreement. They terrorized this council for generations. They ruled through fear and intimidation. But you tolerated them because you needed their military strength. Because your peaceful species could not defend themselves. You traded freedom for security and convinced yourselves it was necessary. The Overseer flickered. The Krell provided protection. The Krell provided the illusion of protection. Jake countered. They kept you safe from external threats while becoming an internal threat themselves. They were parasites, feeding on your fear and your inability to defend yourselves. Eventually, they would have taken over completely. Today was just the beginning. If we had not stopped them, how many more delegations would have died? Lisa walked closer to the podium. Her boots echoed in the silent chamber. She looked up at the Overseer, and then around at all the delegations watching from their protected zones. You asked us what makes us different from the Krell. I will tell you. The Krell hunt for dominance. They kill to prove they are strong. They terrorize because it feeds their pride. They are bullies who prey on the weak because it makes them feel powerful. She gestured to the bodies. Humans hunt to protect. We kill to defend. We fight because sometimes violence is the only language that predators understand. The Krell thought we were weak because we chose peace. They did not understand that we were simply waiting, hoping we would never need to remember what we are. But when they murdered innocent beings, when they threatened this council, we did what our biology designed us to do. We protected the herd. The Veltroni delegation stirred in their tank. One of their philosophers projected a question through the translation network. But how do we know you will not turn on us? You have proven yourselves capable of violence. What stops you from becoming the next Krell? Jake answered. 347 years. That is what stops us. We unified our world. We ended our wars. We chose cooperation over conquest. We spent centuries building a civilization based on trade and diplomacy and mutual benefit. And we did all of that knowing what we were, knowing what we could do. We looked at our capacity for violence and decided to use it only when necessary, only to protect, never to dominate. The Kresh swarm buzzed with rapid communication. Their collective consciousness reached a conclusion and spoke through their designated voice. You ask us to trust that you will continue to choose peace, but choices can change. Circumstances can change. What happens when your interests conflict with ours? What stops you from using violence to get what you want? Lisa smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was genuine, almost sad. Nothing stops us. That is the point. You cannot control us. You cannot force us to be peaceful. You can only trust that we will continue to choose cooperation over conflict, just as you have been trusting the Krell for millennia, except we have never given you reason to doubt us. 3 centuries of honest dealing. 3 centuries of keeping our word. 3 centuries of restraint even when we had the power to take what we wanted. The chamber filled with murmurs, delegates conferring with their own species, calculating risks, weighing options. They had a choice now. Expel humanity and hope they could find another military power willing to protect them, or accept that humans were predators and trust that they would continue to choose the right path. A new voice joined the discussion. It came from the Terran delegation zone, but that zone was empty, the occupants murdered. The voice came from the station's communication system. A recording, a message that had been set to play automatically if certain conditions were met. This is Senior Philosopher Crane of the Terran delegation. If you are hearing this message, it means the Krell have killed us. We anticipated this possibility. Our recent votes have angered them. But we chose to stand by our principles rather than submit to intimidation. We knew the cost. The recording paused, then continued. We place our trust in the human delegation. In 3 centuries of observation, we have found them to be honorable, principled, and yes, dangerous. But danger can be a shield as well as a weapon. If we have been murdered, we ask the Council to remember that the humans are not our killers, and we request that they be given the authority to ensure this never happens again. The message ended. The chamber remained silent. A dead philosopher's final request hung in the air. Jake felt something tight in his chest. The Tertians had known. They had seen what the Krell were becoming, and they had trusted humanity to do what needed to be done, even knowing it would mean violence. Even knowing it would expose humanity's true nature to the galaxy. The Overseer spoke. The Tertians have made their wishes clear, but the decision belongs to the full Council. We will vote. The question before us is this. Should humanity retain full Council membership? And should they be granted military authority to act as protectors of Council space? Jake and Lisa returned to their delegation zone. The vote would proceed without their input. They had done all they could, shown the Council what humans were capable of, explained their philosophy, made their case. Now it was up to beings who had spent the entire session fearing them. The voting took less than 5 minutes. Every single species voted yes, even the ones who had called for human expulsion at the start of the session. Even the Veltroni, who were philosophically opposed to all violence. Even the Kresh, whose collective consciousness had calculated the odds and found them favorable. They voted to keep humanity in the Council. They voted to give humans military authority. They voted to trust the predators, because they had no other choice. The alternative was finding another species willing to provide protection. And after watching the Krell turn on them, after seeing how quickly their military protectors had become their oppressors, the Council understood something fundamental. Better to trust predators who chose peace than predators who craved dominance. The Overseer made it official. Humanity is granted full authority to establish and maintain military defenses for Council space. You will train security forces from willing species. You will patrol trade routes. You will respond to threats both external and internal. And you will do so with the full trust and support of this Council. Jake nodded. We accept, but understand this. We will not become what the Krell were. We will not rule through fear. We will not demand tribute or special privileges. We serve the Council's interests, not our own. And if we ever fail in that duty, if we ever abuse this authority, you have our permission to revoke it. We choose to be your protectors, but that choice remains yours to accept or reject. 3 weeks later, human warships entered Krell space. The Krell supremacy had filed protests and complaints. They had demanded that the Council punish humanity for killing their ambassador. They had threatened retaliation, right up until the moment that human vessels appeared above their homeworld. The mighty Krell Empire sued for peace the same day. They agreed to pay reparations to the Terran families. They accepted permanent observers to ensure they followed Council law. They surrendered their military authority without protest, because they had learned the same lesson the Council learned. Humans were not soft. They were not weak. They were not domesticated prey pretending to be predators. They were patience personified. And when that patience ended, they were unstoppable. Jake stood on the bridge of the first human warship commissioned for Council service. He looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought them here. 3 centuries of choosing peace. 3 centuries of proving themselves through cooperation and trade, all of it built on a foundation of restrained violence, of power held in check, of predators who had decided to be shepherds. Lisa joined him at the window. Her reflection showed in the transparent steel. "Do you think they will ever trust us completely?" Jake shook his head. "No, but that is fine. Trust has to be earned. Every single day, through actions, not words, through choices, not promises. We proved we could be peaceful. Now we prove we can be trusted with violence. It will take time. Maybe another 3 centuries, but we have patience. It is what we do best." The ship's engines hummed to life, ready for the next patrol, the next crisis, the next moment when humanity would need to remember what they were and use it to protect those who could not protect themselves. The predators had accepted their role, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians. Shepherds watching over a herd that had finally learned the difference between wolves and sheepdogs. The galaxy would never make the mistake of calling them soft again. They had seen what happened.